Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on the time zone that you're joining us from today. My name is Tamara McMillan. I'm honored and thrilled to be hosting this Sales Hacker webinar today. I'm currently the board advisor to CSO UK, and I'm here to introduce the topic of how world-class SDR teams build targeting lists for outbound sales. And I think we should add on for sales success, because that's really what we're all about here, is delivering on the promise. I'm going to be joined by two speakers who are the subject matter experts, John Kosturos and Tito Bohrt. But before I have them introduce themselves, I'll just mention a few housekeeping items. So whilst we're live today, we are recording this, so it'll be available to you later. We'll send a copy out, and you can also feel free to share that so that more can take advantage of what we're going to hear today. And we'd love to know where you're joining us from, so please feel free to say hello in the chat and drop your name. Tell us where you work and what you do. And we also want this to be interactive. Whilst we have some experts here on the line, we want to make sure that we answer your questions, and that'll help make this conversation much more fun and interesting. So if you'll use the Q&A box, we'll be monitoring that, and we'll take questions as much as we can throughout the conversation. So without further ado, let's crack on and have a good chat here. John, could I ask you to introduce yourself first?
Yes, name's John Kosturos. I'm the Chief Product and Officer and Head of Sales at RingLead. I've been helping lead the charge there for about the last 10 years and have spent most of my career leading sales and marketing teams and doing it with a data-driven approach.
Excellent. We like data at the heart of good decision making. And Tito, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Tito Bohrt, CEO at Altisales, and I've been building SDR teams for the past 7 years or so. Built over 30 now, and each one comes with its different challenges and opportunities and excitement. So very excited to share with you guys how I think about data and how I think you guys should think about data as you're building perhaps your first, second, or third SDR team. You can get some ideas from somebody who's done 30 plus.
Excellent. Well, that leads us really nicely into what I'll pose as our first question. Despite the fact that there is a lot of data, we've all been victim to sort of the dreaded spray and pray tactics that sales uses, kind of like opening the phone book and dialing for dollars and hoping that somebody responds. So can we talk, and John, I'll direct this question to you. Can we talk about why that we'll call it a strategy, why that never works. And but if we're not reaching out to the whole universe, how do we know which accounts we should be reaching out to?
Yeah, I think, what I often find when training new sales reps, or even if a sales rep has tenure in the industry, but they're new within an organization, they typically go straight to their, hey, who do I know? Or maybe I can find people at certain schools that I went to and, see if there's any relevance and I can get an easy win with a buyer. And, I'm all for those personal tactics, but I always coach on the fact that it's more about the company and B2B sales, at least, than anything else. And so before you start thinking about the people you're going to reach out to, I think it's very important to identify the businesses that are right for the product or service that you sell. And many companies will provide that information for you. But I'll tell you a little bit about how we do that. There's a set of first-party data that we always collect around our customers. But typically that information is not enough to drive insights into what types of accounts really are best for our businesses. And so what we do is we go out and identify third parties who have information that can supplement the data that we get from our customers to help us make better insights. So I'll give you an example. We use ZoomInfo to get hierarchies on businesses of our customers so we can better understand who their parent companies are. Those are probably good targets to go after, right? We also get general firm data from them, like how big a company is in terms of revenue, employee size, how many salespeople they have within the company. We have a really cool tool that can be sold to salespeople or their sales managers. We also then use Crunchbase to understand, if those companies we're dealing with or have sold to are capitalized and what types of funds are investing in them. We found that a strategy is to actually go after the funds of customers that you have density within the portfolio. We also use a company called Demand Matrix to help us understand information behind the firewall, like how many certified Marketo or Eloqua or Salesforce experts a company has. And that's kind of a key indicator that they're going to have a big database and a lot of infrastructure in those systems, which we kind of target. And then lastly, a recent stat we've added to our ideal customer profile because of COVID, we've seen a huge amount of deals pushed just in the industry. And so one of the ideal customer profile data points we're using now is a company called Database USA can tell you whether or not a company has received stimulus packages and how much the stimulus packages, and even in some cases how they're putting them to use. And then lastly, we layer on some intent data from a company called 1080x2 and another called Bohrt. I'm sure you guys have all heard of a lot of these, but they can provide information around what keywords are being searched by that company and what they're looking at on the web to identify possible buying cycles early on within these companies. And so after we get the data, right, it's all about analyzing against different scenarios. So what we like to do is take scenarios like customers who close the fastest. So you can just run these reports in Salesforce, whatever CRM, like the least amount of activities, least amount of time to close one. Customers who have the largest deal size, customers who buy the most often, customers with the greatest lifetime value, customers with the lowest CAC versus profit ratio margin, and then customers who have the highest usage. And so once we can identify kind of those types of reports, we run a correlation analysis to identify those pockets of companies that we would consider ideal account profile. And you can have more than one profile. So that's kind of my recommendation, is that you take a data-first approach to identify the information that's critical in your sale and layer that into your analysis to identify smaller buckets of companies that you can have more relevant conversations with.
I think you touched on so many things there. The first is that I'll let you.
Before we get into that, I mean, here's what I'll do. I think this will be a more fun webinar if we disagree. So I'm going to disagree very strongly with John here. Here's why. Like, I'm already dizzy from all the things that John's talking about. Like, oh, you got to use these 17 data sources and grab all these and mesh it up. And what's your LTV to CAC ratio on your accounts? Like, here's the truth, guys. Like, if you are a sales rep or an SDR and you're trying to figure out how you're going to build your account list, you're not going to go tomorrow and spend $100 million on 142 tools and do it like John does it. So I think the benefit of having John is John's a freaking expert. He's done this super, super well. But I don't recommend anybody, probably in this webinar, like 99% of the people here, you should not go do what John's doing. Let's start with a step back. Let me tell you what every company is doing today, and it sucks. What every company that I talk to, right? And these are like startups that have raised less than $100 million, meaning you're not a unicorn yet. Here's what I see. VP of Sales says, we need a list. They go on one tool and they say, we sell to enterprise companies, and they export a list of every business out there with over 1,000 employees in 1, 2, or 3, or 7 industries. And then they say, here you go, sales guys, go sell. And it sucks. And it sucks because like you don't know what to do, and that list is never good. And even the worst part about it is, let's say you sell marketing technology to companies that are advertising on Facebook, or let's say you sell SDR services like myself. Then all these companies might or might not be good targets. It's a good proxy, but there's no accuracy. Like, I don't know if all these companies are actually advertising on Facebook. And the mistake I see over and over and over again is that they try one strategy, and 6 months later or a year later, they say, I don't know if that was working. Let's pull another list. And they start from scratch and they pull another list, and they just dump everything into their CRM. And their CRM data is dirtier and dirtier and dirtier every year. So a 5-year-old startup now has thousands and thousands and thousands of accounts in Salesforce that are divided into some sort of territory that might not be accurate. And each sales rep has some sort of accounts with contacts that were there 4 years ago. And it's all like bad data. and they keep adding and adding and adding. So I think that's how most companies are running today. Like, what I'd love to hear from the audience on the chat is, do you feel like you have too much data in your CRM and is too much of it inaccurate? And if, okay, I see a +1 down there and people coming through. So I think that if, okay, I see lots of yeses coming through. Okay, so let's talk about that. So
but imagine, Tito, before you go on, I mean, I think there's two things here. First of all, I think John's point is still valid for organizations that are of size and scale and budget to do it, because when if you can analyze that data, you're going to go further faster, and you're going to be able to make those better decisions about, account allocations and where you're spending your time. And the other thing that's 100%. Interesting is you're absolutely right. We have all these CRM systems loaded full of crap data. However, it still is the problem that needs to be addressed. Probably not by the salespeople that are BDRs that are going out and trying to win these opportunities, but at the same time, we invest a lot of money in these systems for the intelligence that they can deliver. And if we just let, the problem is sales managers not managing people to actually manage their data, because that's the only place you're going to get it. So maybe it's different tools that automate the data or cleanse the data, or that you're just more disciplined about the data. But is it fair to 100%. Just use it?
Yeah, no, here's the thing. So John and I agree on a lot of things, right? Like, we talked before this webinar, we spent 2 hours together. I freaking love this guy. He's a genius, right? Now, where are we? Where are we in the world, right? So like, what John is doing, think about it this way. John is to data operations and organizing your data what Cristiano Ronaldo is to soccer. And here we're talking to startups that are like early in them building their data sets, which is the equivalent of like a 5-year-old kid. And we're like, hey, 5-year-old kid, here's how you like score goals when you play in the Premier League or in like La Liga. And what we think I need to take a step back and start thinking is, John, why don't you and I think about a little bit, or talk about, and I think we agree on this, how do we build our first target account list? And how do we make sure that it doesn't get dirty? Like, what's your strategy? How valuable is it to keep data from 5 years ago when it's target accounts? How about target personas?
Yeah, so I mean, the target accounts kind of decay much slower. Now, you will disqualify target accounts, so they are gonna adjust, right? And criteria or new product lines may adjust your focus as a business. I think the number one thing, and I saw a question, I'm going to answer back in a second here, but somebody asked a question about kind of like the highest priority in terms of figuring out your ideal customer profile. And what I'm going to say there is, your accounts, like you said, are not going to change very often, but they will morph. Now, the contacts that you're going to be going after, I mean, in our business, we see Salesforce admins, marketing ops professionals, they are moving like every 6 months. I mean, you can't keep a contact list clean in that industry because it's such a competitive talent pool that it's moving from place to place. And so we find that the companies, to answer your question, Tito, are typically a lot more static in the data change than the person records. But a way that we like to identify the types of people, at least at these companies, is once you get to the ideal account profile, if you're able to link the people in your database to the accounts within your database, which if any of you are CRM experts, you'll know that's a traditional challenge. You'll be able to identify journeys within an account. And that's one thing that people most often don't do. They identify the journey of the individual who reached out, raised their hand, went through your demo, went through the buying process and purchased. But what we find is if you do more of an account-based attribution to see all campaign and activity history across an account throughout the journey of your best customers, you'll find that there are certain analysts or types of personas doing research before they ever talk to you. They're on your website, they're going to events. And then you got your hand raisers, right? The ones that fill out the forms and, maybe go to the first demos. And then you get your executive sponsors and your coaches throughout your medic, process. What you'll find is if you can analyze across the journey of a customer, you'll better understand the personas or the types of job titles that are relevant to the types of companies that you're selling to. So that's really how we get to the persona, Tito. How we keep it fresh is a whole nother game, right? Like you've mentioned sometimes, I think you've mentioned you end up deleting the contacts every 3 to 6 months and just coming out fresh and new. And it's not necessarily a bad idea, right? Like I'd like to kind of hear your thoughts on that. How do you keep the contacts fresh?
So here's the way I think about it. You call it data decay. I call it the half-life of data, right? Depending on how you want to see it. But the concept is the same. The question is, how long is my data valid for, right? And here's what I believe. A lot of like marketing teams, even in B2B, they're using B2C strategies to think about their data decay. I'll give you an example. If I go to Patagonia and I'm saying I'm interested in buying sweaters, like, what is the chance that next season I'm also interested in Patagonia sweaters? Pretty high, because I'm the same person. I still like Patagonia. How about 5 years from now? Am I still interested in Patagonia sweaters? Well, yeah, dude, my sweaters kind of like are worn out. I need new sweaters, and I like Patagonia as a brand. So my personal email address to a company like Patagonia is really, really valid and helpful. Now, if I am the director of sales at XYZ startup, and I'm interested in a B2B SaaS product right now, what are the chances that 2 years from now, one, I hold the same role at the same company and I'm interested in the same product? Chances are very slim. Like you said, people change jobs every year, every 2 years. And moreover, it's not necessarily changing company jobs. Like if I went from being an SDR to now a sales ops person, my interests within the B2B world are different. So I believe that every company is better off deleting their contact data every 9 months. And I don't mean you deleted January and then September and then June. What I'm saying is when you add a contact to your CRM, you should timestamp when was this contact added. And if the contact was added more than 9 months ago, I would delete it. Now, a marketing person is going to come and tell me, you're crazy. Just validate if the contact is valid. And I'm like, no, you delete it. And here's why. Because even if the contact is still at the company, he might have changed jobs. So what you might need to do is go back on LinkedIn, check their new role, and if their role is the same and there's still a target persona, then validate their email and phone number. But that workflow is equal or more difficult than just saying, you know what? Coca-Cola has been the target account forever. Let me just, with a quick LinkedIn sales nav, find myself again the buyer personas, and with Lead IQ or Lucia or ZoomInfo, with one click, import everybody back to my CRM. That workflow is much faster than trying to revalidate. So my view is contact data, more than 9 months old, throw it in the trash and delete it. And that at least is going to take the people who are watching this webinar and said, my CRM is full of crap. That's going to take away 80 to 90 to 97% of the contacts out of there. And now my question to you, John, is now every person in this webinar has thousands and thousands and thousands of accounts within their CRM. How do they clean that one up? Because Coca-Cola was a target account 10 years ago. They're probably still a target account. What do you do with that?
Yeah, see, what I've been doing for the last 10 years is building automation software for data processes that support sales and marketing. So when I hear these things, right, my first instinct is I'm trying to solve this problem of, okay, I've got contacts, I've got LinkedIn Navigator, say Enterprise, and I get now alerts in Salesforce. So I can get an alert from LinkedIn when my contacts change right within my CRM. And then I can make a web service call to this is what I do. I'm like, okay, now how do we enrich that? We know the person's moved. Well, we call Bing and Google to find out the new job title, the new company, if they've moved companies. And then we call back out programmatically to ZoomInfo or, Oceanus or any of the Clearbit contact providers to fill in their new contact information and then reparent it at the new account or update their information in Salesforce. So that, my whole point is salespeople shouldn't have to, I want them to stay in Salesforce. I want them to stay in their CRM. I don't want them outside of the CRM. I want to provide what they need within the CRM. and do it at the requirements of my sales leadership, like Tito. Like me and Tito could be like a deadly combination together because he'd tell me what he needed and I could fill those data requirements, right? But on the company side, same thing. Like there are tools and technologies that can take a list of accounts and make programmatic calls on a series of time frames, like if it's days, if it's months, different data sources like intent may need to be refreshed more often than something like the revenue numbers that come out quarterly or annually. And so we would set those companies to run on an actual refresh cycle to the data providers that we know are best, and then have a scoring mechanism. We call it a propensity model that is doing all the scoring for those accounts, recalculating the score every time a data point changes on the accounts to like automatically refresh the set of companies that you're targeting as a business. So that's kind of how I would do it. I'm always trying to automate, but a lot of people do it in a lot of different ways. I mean, how do you feel like you're best able to keep account information up to date?
Yeah, I'll tell you how my team does it, and it's very simple. I think day one, what you got to do is grab a big list of target accounts, and you can just do a data dump or an export, whatever tool you have, DataFox, ZoomInfo, whatever, DiscoverOrg, do a data dump. But as your team is working it, you should start dividing it into 3 buckets, right? Bucket number 1 is going to be my top accounts. Imagine you sell a product that helps companies advertise better on Facebook, right? Bucket number 1 is I looked at this company's like Facebook account and they have over like 100 ads running. Or even if you're like a more advanced company and you already use the Facebook ad library API, that data can get enriched immediately, just like John does. But in the early days, you don't have the manpower or the sales ops people to put it into an automatic updating of data. So you just say, every SDR, before they reach out, they got to check out the Facebook information, or you go on Crunchbase and you check how much money have they raised, or you whatever, right? And then you're going to build your list of cherry-picked top accounts. You call these tier 1, and give them special attention. Everybody else who's good but is not excellent, let's say maybe they have 1 to 15 ads on Facebook. They could use your product. They're part of your TAM, but they're not your ideal customer profile. You're not like, oh my God, this would be a huge account. They're like a fine account, whatever. You keep them as, let's say, tier 2 or B target accounts. And then you bump into some other companies that they came out of your data dump because they're a B2C account that does e-commerce. And then suddenly they don't have any Facebook ads and they've never had Facebook ads. Well, chances are that that's a bad account. So I might just go grab it and put it in a do not call list, timestamped. As of July 30th, 2020, I put this account in a do not call due to the fact they don't have any Facebook ads running. And I might check that manually again every year. Every year, anybody who was on a do not call, I would delete and they get back to a B, right? And so on and so forth. So you can organize your buckets, and if you're time stamping, you can do it. Now, you can do this in CRM, you can do this in like Google Sheets, you can do it in many different ways. One quick question I do want to address is that people were asking, hey, am I going to lose all my information if I delete my contact data? It depends how your CRM is structured, right? If you have never had a meeting with a company and you've never had an opportunity with a company, I would just delete any data that's older than 6 months old. Like nobody cares. If you're like, Tito, I want to sell to you because you visited our booth in the 2014 like Dreamforce event. I'm like, dude, I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter. Or somebody from your company met with us 3 years ago. I'm like, it's the same as 0. Like the relevancy of that event from a year ago or 2 years ago, it's likely almost 0. And the effort or like how much you hurt your company by having such vast amounts of data in a CRM as a startup hurts you a lot. Now, don't get me wrong. Once you're like John and you have a team of 20 sales ops people that can live in Salesforce and they can integrate everything, and you can, through an API, put the data from Crunchbase and from Facebook and all these things, sure, your data automatically cleans itself. But in the meantime, I think the amount of dirty data in your CRM hurts you more than it helps you. That's my high level overview. I know we have a lot of Q&A questions. I don't know, Tamara, if you're monitoring those, if there's anything specific.
I've been monitoring some of them and popping them in when it seems more fitting, and we have a few here. This is sort of a fun question. I want to ask one of my own before too long, but let me ask this one first. Is the cold call dead? Especially with all the remote work, you're getting more and more going more to voicemail. So what are some of the out-of-box outbound methods that supplant the cold call?
I think this is the complete opposite of what we've seen. I mean, cold calls are working incredibly well right now because you can call their cell phone. You can get data from Lead IQ, Zoom Info, and Lucia. They all provide cell phone data, right? You go on Zoom Info, find the cell phone. And when you call them, they're like, hello, this is John. You say, hey, John, this is Tito calling from Altisales. You know, did I catch you at a good time or whatever, however you start your calls. And they're like, hey, you called my cell phone. You just say, yeah, I know, of course. I mean, everybody's working from home, so I just call your cell phone. Do you have a few minutes? And they're like, oh, yeah, no problem. Like, people are way less averse to cold calls now that they're at home. However, if you look at your email inbox, especially if you're a director level plus, the number of emails I've been getting over the past 3 months, and statistics are out there, email volume has gone up like 100%. It has doubled. And email response rates are like tanked. Nobody's responding to email and everybody's getting way more email. So I think email is dead and cold calls are like the new king.
And LinkedIn spam does not work. Let's just stop that right now.
Yeah, I agree. The LinkedIn spam doesn't work. Nobody answers that. I still think that email's the most cost-effective way to get in front of a buyer. Phone is for sales. Obviously, that's the one thing that we're having to deal with a generation that's coming up that just doesn't believe in the phone. But they slowly get through that, and I think the phone is, like you said, Tito. You can find home phones, mobile phones. If you can get somebody on the phone, that's the best way to have a conversation. But I've been finding like Slack groups. I mean, there's Slack channels in our industry where the marketing operations professionals and sales ops professionals. There's 10 threads that are going on about 5 different topics that I'm good at talking about. And it's like, if you can just interject yourself into these different communication avenues. I also think that if you write your own content, a lot of salespeople, they think that they're just going to, some brands you're able to just sit back and be good at sales and be able to utilize your brand, reputation and all the collateral. But salespeople need to create their own brand. I mean, you have to become a subject matter expert if you want somebody who's important that you're going to cold call to think that you're going to provide value to them. And if you're not the subject matter expert, try to find a company that is built around educational selling, because that kind of calls a lot easier when you're trying to teach somebody or provide them value than ask them for a meeting.
Well, I had a question on that because I think a lot of you've been talking a lot, Tito, about the startup environment, and I think we've acknowledged, John, that perhaps some of the sophistication that you're doing works more in larger enterprise, more established businesses. But I wonder, where are the nuances that need to be understood in terms of this time of the sales cycle, the contract term time? I mean, if I'm calling companies, the products that we sell, customers have or sign contracts for a certain length of time, to what extent does that data still have value, and to what extent is it irrelevant? And does it matter if I'm selling transactional products or complex products? Are there any variabilities in the advice that you're giving? Because we have a lot of different types of people and working in different markets.
Variability, I think.
Well, here's the thing. I'll talk about my area, right? So I do B2B software as a service companies with average deal size of over 20K. Because if you're building a target accounts list and you're thinking account-based marketing, account-based sales development, you don't do account-based marketing for Patagonia sweaters. You just do freaking contact-based, and you just email the hell out of people, right? Until they either get pissed and unsubscribe or they buy, right? Now, in our context, right, of my view of what Sales Hacker encompasses, which is we're B2B sellers, we have people building target accounts lists, which is I assume the audience here today. It means that you're also not selling a $10 a month product because you don't have salespeople for that. It's a web conversion, right?
Right. So, but are you selling a $300K a month product or a $500K a month? I mean, what about more complex businesses, larger software sales?
I think anything over 20K a month or 20K a year should follow the same process: account-based marketing, account-based sales development, right? If it's 500K a month, I don't know too many products that are 6 million a year. I mean, there must be some out there, right? But I think most people are selling a 20K to 200K. Now, for me, the strategy is clear. And the things that you're saying, John, I think they're all valuable. Like, should you write your own content? Yeah, I mean, between writing your own content and like sitting on the couch and doing nothing, 100% go write your own content. However, if you're a seller, like as a company, yes, you need good content. And don't write a lot of content. Write very little, very helpful content. If you Google my name, Tito Bohrt, sales hacker, 8 blogs, I can guarantee you read those 8 blogs and all of them will be like, holy cow, this is incredible. This is super helpful. I don't have 700 blogs. Any company that has 700 blogs, you're talking too much. Do the 12 that matter and put them out there. How to solve the SDR to AE handoff. Is anybody having problems with that? Google SDR to AE handoff. Like, I wrote about that. That's one niche that I know how to address. So writing content, yes. But I think that as a seller, you shouldn't be writing content, because if I have 30 sales reps and each seller is writing 1 blog a month, holy cow, like we have hundreds and hundreds of blogs. And what happens? A prospect comes to a sales blog, they read it and they're like, this is bad. I'm never going to read from this blog, which is altisales.com or titobohrt.com/blog. If there's 700 blogs and 20 are incredible, 50 are okay-ish, and 620 are bad, people stop reading your blog. So my view is target accounts, calls and emails that work. Don't be too annoying. Send a few. Giving people time to think and rest, and retarget every 6 months the same account, but it will be different personas. Yeah. So throw your personas in the trash, but continuously enrich or rethink your companies. How many ads do you have? How much money did you raise? This, and that. And then you have a very good list of target accounts. And when you say, okay, I'm going to go after these 10, 20, 30, 50 target accounts, you go research the personas, you reach out to them with 5 phone calls, 5 emails, take it back, give them 6 months.
So we have a question. Sorry, did you want to jump in, John, or can I go with a question?
I was going to bring up a question. So yeah, go for it.
Well, there's one here from Andrew Morales. It says, thinking about the tech stack to help keep data clean and alleviate data decay. Technologies common being talked about are strong players in the States. Does any of this change when thinking about EMEA with GDPR restrictions? And how do you think about your global tech stack for this issue? Is it different in EMEA and the subregions within EMEA? And now let's talk about Brexit, the UK.
110%. That's one of the reasons we basically created this free search engine. It's called the dataexchange.ringlead.com, and it's built to help people find information they need. Right now there's about 30 worldwide data providers on there. It's going to be at 100, 200 soon, and the catalog there and the insights on who has what and what is compliant where is tremendously helpful for people trying to find data sources. And for like GDPR, let's talk about that. You can't just go buy contact data and start emailing people in, the EU. You actually have to get GDPR compliant information. So the first thing that comes to mind is a company like Cognism. Cognism focuses on contacts in EU. They were started by a company that had some sort of relationship with the legal firm that built the GDPR requirements with the government. And so they have an amazing GDPR contact data set. Then you've got, on the company side, you can't just go to any data provider to give you company data and hierarchies in EMEA. You've got to find companies like Insight View or Dun & Bradstreet. ZoomInfo has a nice global coverage as well, but every data company is going to focus on different things. So while most people today, and I've heard a lot about big company versus small company, but I'll tell you right now that 80% of the companies I work with are under 100 million in revenue. They're just the ones that are, they're growing really fast. They're getting capital. They're setting up systems early, and they invest in the operations of that sales practice, right? And so I think the big thing here is that no one data source is typically going to be perfect for any of you, no matter how big or small you are, because everybody's good at something, and they're better at some things than they are at other things, and they're more compliant at some things than they are at other things. So you'll probably need to have a search resource or people to advise you on where you can safely purchase and implement data within your company. And that's good on whether you're a big company or a small company, because at the end of the day, I spent a career trying to educate a market that data is, the backbone of your sales and marketing. So I think, to me, to answer that question, yes, you got to be very careful of what data you're implementing where and who's good at selling what or providing what. And it can be a difficult market to kind of navigate.
Tito, we do have somebody that wants to talk more about the BDR to AE handoff.
Topic for a different webinar, I would say.
Okay.
And they can read the blog, or if they have specific questions, I can answer them. But let's focus on data today. I think that's what most people are here for.
Perfect. We had one there about the ideal number of accounts for a BDR to handle with deal sizes of 50 to 200K. What would you say to that?
Here's my view. I think that it is a mistake to say, okay, SDR, here are 100 accounts and work them and let me know when you need more. I think what you need to have is a drip. What do I mean by that? I am an SDR, and at any given point, I have contacts in outreach. And at any given point, I have, let's say, 500 contacts in outreach because I make X many calls a day and I send X many emails a day and I have X many number of days between calls and emails. So to fill up my day, I need to have, let's say, 200, 400, 600 contacts in outreach at any given point. Now, if a contact, I call them and they're like, go to hell, I'm not going to take a meeting. Remove my whole company from your list. Okay, you hang up, you remove the guy, you remove the whole company. Well, now you're a little bit short on data. You should have automatically more leads come in, right? So that's the way I think about it. You shouldn't be assigning your SDRs a certain number of accounts and then be like, work these, because you run into two problems. You assign them too many accounts and you say, I'm going to take them back in 3 months and you give me 20,000 accounts. Well, as an SDR, my best strategy to maximize my chances is just email blast the hell out of people and get connect and sell and call everybody. And even if I'm enterprise, I'm going to hurt my targets and I'm going to annoy them. That's what you're doing, right? However, the opposite also hurts me. If you tell me, Tito, here's 50 accounts. This is all you have for the year. Holy cow. Now I'm going to call each lead 172 times because I have nothing else to work. And then I'm going to annoy the prospects.
Yeah.
So what is the prospect-centric thing to do? That's what Outreach and Salesloft and all these companies created. The prospect-centric thing to do is have a drip of contacts and accounts coming into a sequence, and you just work the sequence. And when the sequence is low on leads, you just top it off, top it off, top it off. How do you distribute the accounts across your SDRs? Google Tito Bohrt, territory-based SDRs. Please don't.
I read that one.
So you can go find that one.
So one of the things we're not talking about is the content, the messages that the SDRs are sending. And I don't know if we want to touch on that much or not, but I think the message and the approach and how much you are focused on the customer outcomes versus the products and services, because most of the phone calls, the emails, the LinkedIns, and anything I get are feature benefit driven. They're terrible. They have nothing to do with the customer. They have all to do with the technology. So we've got some questions that have come in that are not exactly about the message, a little bit still on the delivery mechanism, but I think that they're important. And if you have any comments on the messages themselves, that would be helpful. So it was, there's a couple here. Do you think personalized or unique subjects for emails are effective? What about using video through something like LinkedIn? What about Instagram and Facebook? So they're thinking of other types of social channels and different ways to be connecting with customers. So I don't know, John, do you want to start with that? Because I know you said that you still thought that email was cost effective, but maybe comment more broadly on some of these other more creative social ways of engaging. And if you have any thoughts on the message, because that's the part that I'm really passionate about is actually what are we talking about with these companies?
Yeah, so I think I'll answer that in two parts. One part is, I think, again, it is important to know who you're targeting when putting together personalized messaging for anything. So again, if you can get your target accounts distributed in a way where, like for us, we do sell big tickets, right? So we're trying to get big companies or fast growing companies, and most of those companies have publicity, or they're either public or there's information about at least what those companies' goals are on like Crunchbase, or I can go read a 10K or a quarterly transcript. And so for me, I want my reps like zeroed in and focused on creating a story where they can go in and understand who the executive sponsor is within a company, as well as who the influencers and decision makers will be, and gear their story around what that executive sponsor's goals and priorities are. So, like, if you go in and you read an annual report, or as much of it as you can, if you got a list of, to answer your question, I'd give 25 to 50 really solid target accounts, but then they're going to get some inbound flow as well from scored engagements as well. But those 50 accounts, if I'm researching like I would for school, what those companies are actually, what their goals are, and what the person in the organization's goal is that I'm trying to influence, then you can much easier personalize a message to their CMO or their VP of sales, because what you need to do is speak to the priorities of the person who has sign off on whatever that person you want to sell is. So if you're selling to salespeople, if you're selling to marketing people, IT, whatever, it's about identifying who that executive sponsor is, trying to plan your communication and priorities based on what they're planning. And if you have a list of 50 target accounts and they're in similar industries, et cetera, most likely you're going to find 5 to 10 of them that have similar priorities, similar types of people at their companies, that you can basically refresh information that you've created for your first one. So that's the way I would do it. It will be much different in smaller industries, smaller sales. So I can't speak to every one of those circumstances.
No, I appreciate that. We do have loads and loads of questions. I don't know if you, Tito, if you can see them now, if there were particular ones you want to answer. Otherwise, very happy to keep plucking them off because it looked like the presenter view might have changed.
Yeah, I'm trying to answer as many as I can to the Q&A.
Yeah. So I think there's some questions around, there are a few different questions, and I don't know if you happen to answer them, but I think people are wondering about some of the specifics around, should you tell your SDRs how many accounts they should have in their outreach sequence at a given time? Should managers set an amount of activity, emails, calls, LinkedIn's per day, et cetera, for their teams, or should it be quality over quantity? I think people have a lot of questions around some of the more detailed mechanics in trying to understand to what degree they need to dole those things out.
Yeah, let me give you my strategy. So imagine the first thing you're going to do, let's say you're a brand new startup and you want to do this well, right? So here's what I would do. I would grab some sort of tool, whichever you have access to, that allows me to see target accounts. This might be a Zoom Info. It could be a DataFox. Find a tool that allows me to see accounts and export a list of accounts that is big and is your perceived notion of what a good account might look like, right? If you don't have the budget, just go on, literally buy yourself LinkedIn Sales Navigator. It's $800, and go on LinkedIn and just go on the LinkedIn account search and do the parameters. Over 1,000 employees, based in the US, in these 3 industries. And literally grab a Google sheet and you're going to start typing the name of the company and some data about it, and you're going to build yourself a list, right? In some way, shape, or form, you have a list of, let's say, 1,000 accounts. Now you have 3 SDRs. What do? Do you give them 333 accounts each and you're like off to the races? I don't think so. The reason for that is that if you just give them 333 accounts, when you hire a 4th SDR, what accounts are you going to give that 4th SDR? Well, you only had 1,000. So what do you need to do? Take him back 88 accounts each, and now you're going to have 250 for each? I think that's a problem. So what you do is you create a ledger of your accounts. You have your 1,000 accounts, and you say, okay, we want every SDR to have at any given point 200 contacts in outreach that you're working through the sequence. As soon as they end the sequence, you need more. So John grabbed the top 50 accounts, 4 contacts each. Jennifer grabbed the next 50. This other person grabbed the next 50. Out of the 1,000, we've used 150. We have 850 to go. As you start calling and emailing and people start falling off, when the SDR says, holy cow, I just run out of, I need more leads. You go back to the ledger and you say, I'm grabbing the next 10. And you just grab the next 10. And to make sure nobody's cherry picking any accounts, that list of 1,000 target accounts should be ordered alphabetically. And that is the only way in which you can pick accounts, because you're going to go alphabetically. Now, this is purely for cold outbound, right? If you get an inbound lead, I would do round robin at the beginning. And do you yet have intent data? You don't, because you're a startup. So that's how you start. Now, how do you evolve? Well, this allows you to grow to 4, 5, 6, 7 SDRs really easily. And when your list is done, you either find ways to continue to grow your list or go back to square one. If you go to account number 1, guess what? That account was the first one you reached out to, and that was 6 months ago. So now it's past enough time that you can go back to them. Now, remember what I said. You should trash your contact level data if it's been more than 9 months. So if your account list was 7,000 accounts and now you're back to square one and it's been 2 years, guess what? The marketing manager, the social media manager, the director of marketing, and the VP of marketing that you had before are old. So I would just start from scratch and research from scratch, again, through LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So you can do 99% of your work. If you want to be cheap and scrappy and get it done through LinkedIn Sales Nav, you can do it all and just work accounts top to bottom. And you can continuously grow your SDRs because they're just grabbing the next, right? So you have 3 SDRs, you're at account number 274, hire a new SDR. Well, he needs 50 accounts to get started. He goes from 275 to 325. Anybody running low, grab from 325 to 335. I am shocked that nobody has thought about this before. I've been running this for years, and I've coached people on how to run this, but VP of sales just want to split the whole market on day one, or split the whole United States, split the whole territory. You get Florida. Why do I need all of Florida? I need 50 accounts right now. That's my mindset.
All right. That's a good answer. Anything to add, John?
Cool. Anybody has questions on that? Anybody has ideas for why that might fail? I mean, how could that fail? How could that be unfair too? Here's the other problem. I have companies in the territory-based SDR. I said, here's the problem. I think I'm gonna use random states because I don't remember the exact ones, but I looked it up. So the GDP of California is 10x the GDP of, I think, maybe Alabama, and the GDP of Alabama is the same as the GDP of Oregon. If you look at the number of tech companies in California versus Alabama, let's say it's 20x, and the difference between California and or let's say California and Oregon is 20x, but California and Alabama is 50x. So the problem is, when you do territories, most people divide according to GDP or according to population, but it's never fair because the number of tech companies is not equally distributed by GDP and is not equally distributed by population. Same with farms. Some people sell products to farms. Hey, people who got farming states, you're killing it. And if you got whatever non-farming states, you're in trouble. So the best way is use a random variable, which I call company name. Put your companies alphabetically. Start with A, give me 50 accounts. And what happens as I work these accounts on the SDR? I go and I'm like, let's say I sell a farming product. First company I get, Amazon. Amazon doesn't have any cows, right? Let me scratch that. And then maybe even let me ask my VP of sales, maybe the account list we built is not really good. Did you make sure that the industry was, agriculture? Because this doesn't look like agriculture. So you'd add that account to the do not call list. And then the next one you find is whatever, XYZ farms. You're like, oh my God, they have 700 cows, which is exactly what I sell to. The more cows, the better. Awesome. I'm going to add that to my dream accounts. I'm going to work it. But if I don't get a meeting, it doesn't matter. It's still my dream accounts or my top accounts or my tier one accounts forever, because I've found qualities of that company that are forever going to be true, or for a long time going to be true, that matter. While the contact data won't be true in 6 months or a year or 2 years.
Excellent. Well, we are nearing the end of our time. I wondered if we might just try and cover off a couple more questions before we go. John, there was one for you. It says, the best way to enrich existing data with industry or NAICS codes.
So that's a lot of different companies have industry or NAICS codes. So again, like the same ones I've been saying, like, okay, Zoom Info, Dun & Bradstreet, Inside View, Clearbit. I mean, I'm probably leaving a bunch of really good names out. To get this type of educational information, again, if you go to dataexchange.ringlead.com, you can find that. You just type in NAICS and you'll see all the companies that offer NAICS. I think it'll probably be like 15 different type companies that offer that. But what you want to know is when you ask a data provider, if they're right for you, it's always, I either have a list that I want to enrich, or I'm trying to acquire a list that I don't have. And I want to make sure that you specialize in the geography in where my data is. So like if I have all US records, it'd be pretty easy. But if I have UK and China and Japan and Singapore and all these different countries, then you're going to need to qualify that, because a lot of them have NAICS codes, but they don't have them across the globe. Right? So we figure out which ones have them in the regions you want. And then sometimes verticals, like sometimes companies just really aren't good at enriching your data if you do it for manufacturing or hospitals or higher education. And so your second qualification question to the vendor is, okay, do you specialize in the industries that I'm trying to track? And if they don't specialize in the geography or the industries, then whether they have that attribute you're looking for or not doesn't matter, because they're not going to be able to cover it at a high percentage. But if you can find a vendor, and we help people do this all the time, that has both the attribute that you want, they cover the industries that you care about, and they have geographical coverage in the places that you want to enrich, you're going to get a very high enrichment on that file, and you're going to get very low mismatch rates or inaccuracy rates.
Do you need to ever check, as part of your due diligence, kind of what their data error rate is, or how aged their data is, or how often? Because let's say they meet the criteria, they're a specialist, they're in the geographies that I want, but how do I, there might be still a number of companies that can provide me with that data set. How do I pick between them? And price, of course, would be a factor, but assuming those table stakes are met, they're in the budget, they've got the geography, and they're specialized in my industry. Anything else I need to know about? Not all data is created equal.
That's like what we do is we help create requests for purchase. So you can get a data test done, and so they can say that they're good at it. But if you send them a file that never send, like I can understand the organizing your accounts for follow up from A to Z. But if you're going to do a data test, never send a test that's starting with the A's, because you'll get a bad sample. So if you can get a sample of at least like 500 records across a contact or account data set that you want to test for enrichment, that's a good enough sample size to see which one of those vendors will provide the best data. And then you get the cost as well. So you're like, maybe one can do a 60% match rate, the other one can do 70, but one of them's 10 cents and the other one's 50 cents a match. So like you're going to have cost, but always try to get a test. I mean, who's not going to give you a data test? If they're not going to give you a data test, they're probably not worth working with. Even on net new, they'll give you 5, 10, 50 accounts or contacts as a sample, and you can sample it. So I'd always recommend finding always find more than one vendor, figure out what they have, what they specialize with, run a data test, and then compare the rates to pricing to see which one is going to be your best bet.
Here's another thing I want to add, because the time has flown by, but I started talking a little bit about how you do it in the early days, right? Now, all that manual data that you're doing in the early days, and you're using LinkedIn Sales Nav, and you're finding the employee count like manually, and you're typing it into Excel sheet, at some point that becomes really dumb. Like at some point, that's just so time consuming. And with 20 SDRs, everybody doing that, that's a bad process. So at that point, instead of paying another SDR for that, you figured out now that what you really care about is X, Y, Z, 1, 2, 3 criteria.
Yeah.
So what do you do at that point? At that point, you talk to John, because John's a beast and he understands the data flows, right? And he'll tell you, oh, you need hospital beds. Okay, there's this data provider here that has hospital beds. Oh, you need number of franchise locations. Oh, there's this data provider, and do you need to go buy the data provider and then buy like 17 data providers and look up manually 17 data providers? No, that would be great. That would be so much effort. So what do? You build the APIs and you just connect it into one place. But that's when you have 5, 6, 7, 8 SDRs. And when you realize that there's some way, shape, or form that you want to start using some intent data, you want to start figuring out like what's the combination of things that really matter. Once you've gone tired of the manual process of build yourself your tier 1 through an Excel sheet, and that is starting to feel like so cumbersome, there's much better ways.
It's all about scaling, right? So, I mean, I think you have to fit the processes, the procedures, and the people to where the business is at in its journey of growth. What's its expansion looks like? How's its customer set changing? Because whom we normally grab at a startup and the first customers that we get, they're not necessarily even the right target customers as we grow. We may acquire some other businesses. We may round out our offering. We may shift the geographies. And so as that stuff begins to change, and to your point, Tito, gets refined, then you can set frameworks in place that make the business more scalable and empower salespeople. But all that early work is great learning, right? Because it's very, really, really valuable to refine what's your UVP, what's your best go-to-market strategy, all that stuff. Well, it's been such a fantastic topic. I'm so thrilled that I got to sit here and learn. There are so many questions. Unfortunately, we didn't get to them all, but thank you in the audience for participating in such a dynamic way. John and Tito, thank you for sharing your expertise. You have listed a lot of different tools that can be helpful, and there were several different questions at times about what those things were that you mentioned. They roll off the tongue like music, but I think if there was a way to capture those things for folks to have them after this, it seems like that would really be of value, so they can begin checking out different places to look for data, different tools, Tito, for helping people make those sequencing decisions, etc. So with that, I think we will close down unless there are any final words, gentlemen.
No, thanks everybody for coming. Again, I think that if you are wondering what did I take away from this webinar, is very simple. Start with a little bit of a manual process, figure out what matters for your accounts, put them into 3 different buckets of your top accounts, your do not call accounts, and the rest that you're exploring. And then once you start figuring out what are the elements that matter, and you want to build a scalable process, to find people like John or just talk to John directly at RingLead, and he'll help you build a custom workflow via API with no code that can put everything into one place and will make it awesome, right? So you can never skip the manual part, because like the API will not solve the discovering what matters for you. But once you've discovered what matters, there are easier, faster, better ways to scale it. So thanks, everybody. I don't know if, John, you have some final comments.
No, it's just always a pleasure speaking with you, Tito, and Tamara. Amazing conversation with you as well. We thank everybody for showing up, and we got a lot of questions, and I appreciate the collaboration and your guys' involvement.
Wonderful.
Sure.
Stay safe and stay well, everyone, and we hope we see you again on another Sales Hacker webinar. Bye.